This video is going to look at the influence of culture on gender roles, and the specification basically says that. Influence of culture on gender roles. But this essay is a little bit different to previous ones we've done because there's no theory. All your area 1 is going to be studies, and all your area 3 is going to be limitations or strength of those studies. So, firstly, we're going to look at studies that have shown cultural similarities. So gender is similar around the world. Masculine and feminine mean the same things around the world. That's what this means. So the first study we're going to look at was conducted by Williams and Best. And what they did was they looked at 30 different nations. They had 2,800 students from 30 different nations. And they wanted to find out what gender stereotypes different people in these different nations had. And what they gave people was a 300-item adjective checklist. So it would have been a list of words like aggressive, nurturing, calm, passive, shy, 300 different words, and people had to decide whether that was mostly associated with men or with women. And what they found was that there was a broad consensus across countries, that men were seen as dominant and aggressive, and women were seen as nurturing. So there was a broad consensus across all 30 nations involved in the study. So this suggests that gender and gender identity and gender development is universal, that it's innate, that it must be biologically determined. If everyone around the world has the same gender stereotypes, it points to gender roles being biologically determined. Another study that found cultural similarities in gender was conducted by Buss. And what he did, he looked at what men and women look for in a marriage partner. This is a big study, 10,000 people over 37 different cultures, and there was a range of ethnic, religious, political, economic groups. And the main findings of this study were that women desired mates who had good financial prospects. So women generally look for money. Men, on the other hand, placed importance on physical attractiveness. And men also wanted young women. So women want powerful, rich men. Men wanted young, attractive women. If you think about it, the ideas there are all linked to survival. Women want someone who can protect and look after the family. Men want someone who are young and fertile and are going to be able to have their children. So it does show that there's sort of a biological reason for gender. Okay, and because this is the same across the world in these different 37 cultures, it points to gender roles being biologically determined. Remember, if gender or anything is the same around the world, we're going to be thinking it's biologically determined. However, other studies have found cultural differences in gender. A very famous study conducted by Margaret Mead, who looked at different tribes in Papua New Guinea. And she found that in an Arapesh tribe, the men and women were very gentle. In a Muganmore tribe, men and women were violent. And in a Kambuli tribe, they had differences. The women were dominant and the men were far more dependent. So you've got these 3 different tribes, the Arapesh, the Muandor and the Chicambuli. And she found that in each of the tribes there was different gender roles, which suggests to us that this is down to social factors. The differences in different cultures was down to social factors. And she referred to this as cultural determinism. The culture that you live in determines your gender. So we've got our 3 Area 1 studies, Williams and Best, Buss, Margaret Mead. Now your Area 3 is going to look at the limitations of these studies. So let's look at Williams and Best studies first. Easy one to do, it was done on students. The study therefore lacked population validity. Okay. A different point you might want to mention, remember you only really want one methodological issue per study. So one you might want to talk about is the fact that the checklist didn't have an equal category. So we had aggression, is that male or female? There was no equal category. So people had to pick masculine or feminine, even if they thought it was equal. So potentially the scores may have been exaggerated because people couldn't give across their true opinion. A major strength of Buss's study is that it had such a large sample size. On top of that, it had different ethnic, religious, political, economic groups. So it's an easy study to generalize to the wider population. However, there are a lot of problems with Buss's study. And again, you will need to pick one of these. You don't need to know them all. As long as you can pick one and elaborate on it, that's absolutely fine. So, it was done using self-report methods like questionnaires. You know the weaknesses of questionnaires. People might have shown social desirability. It was only prospective make choices. What you want and what you really do in real life are two completely different things. This is only your ideal scenario. What would you want in a partner? In real life, other things take into consideration. Economic factors, personality, looks, everything comes into it. It's not just your prospective choices. The sample size vary. So in America, you had already 10,000 people. 1,500 almost of those were American, whereas we only had 55 people from Iran. And obviously, the views of those people in Iran will get lost in such a large sample size. So the Western countries like America are going to be overrepresented. Countries like Iran get underrepresented. And also, the sampling techniques differed across the countries. Some countries, like Germany, just sat outside of marriage licensing and asked people, do you mind joining in this study? Other countries like Estonia put adverts in a newspaper. So the fact the sampling techniques differed also reduces the validity of Buss's study. Margaret Mead's study, although she found this idea that it's cultural determinism, that your culture determines it, and it's all social factors that determine your gender, she later changed her mind to one of cultural relativism. She reanalyzed all her data and she found that in all three societies, the Arapesh, the Mugandur, the Chambuli, that in all three, men were more aggressive than the women. And this suggests that some behaviours are innate and universal, but the degree to which they're expressed is relative to a culture. So biology and culture must both play a part. If the men are always more aggressive than the women, that indicates a biological cause for gendered behaviour. Another limitation of Mead's study is this issue of social desirability bias. And Freeman argued that the natives simply gave Mead the information she wanted to hear, which therefore means that the study isn't valid and is not as valid as it would initially seem. Freeman said that she might have even misled the participants in the study, and that her own preconceptions and her own views may have influenced her reading of the events. So Freeman's a big critic of Mead, and it could be something that you try to incorporate into your essay. Another limitation, a big one when you're ever doing any issue on cultural influences, is this issue of imposed ethics. The questionnaires used were all created in the West. Okay, and they were conducted by Western researchers using this Western methodology. And then we get the issue of, do the things that we know as masculine or feminine, do those same words mean the same things in other cultures? Just because males are dominant and aggressive in our culture, does that mean the same thing in other cultures? Do they see masculine as the same thing? So you've got this issue of imposed ethics that you can again elaborate in your essay plans.